Hello, welcome to the second part of the tier list. This is just a quick intro because for some reason the intro on the video was deleted while editing. I don't know how that's possible. But just a quick note before we go in, remember my Jurassic Park reviews will begin in a couple of days. I've actually already recorded the first one, so make sure to look out for that. But we're not going to waste any more time. Enjoy the video and make sure to like and subscribe. Enjoy. Yeah, this film's historically significant, mostly because it's kicked off probably the most successful cinematic universe in history. And there's just so much to love about the first Iron Man. This film would not have worked if it wasn't for Robert Downey Jr.'s amazing performance. I can't think of anyone else to play a live-action version of him. Tony Stark is Robert Downey Jr., and Robert Downey Jr. carries this film. Only problem I have with this film is the villain. He's very inconsistent, and in the end he just turns into this giant guy who's trying to kill people for some reason, and it just felt a bit out of place. But that's just keeping it off a 10, and this is going straight into the S tier, but kicking off positive straight away. I do think it's not as good as Deadpool. I think Deadpool's just brilliant, so we're going to put it just below that, but I think that's a good place. But onto a film which I do not like, Incredible Hulk, the Edward Norton Hulk. I don't like this film. I do think it has some positives though. I think Edward Norton is great as Bruce Banner. The music's actually a very big highlight of this film. I was very surprised. You know, it adds a lot of emotion to the film. Apart from that, the effects are garbage, the action's garbage, the villain's garbage. Sometimes I can't even tell what's going on because of the bad lighting. And this film is just really bad. It's going to go in the D tier. I would definitely watch it over Ang Lee's Hulk. I would definitely watch it over Dark Phoenix, but I wouldn't really watch it over the 80s Punisher. I still think it's just boring sometimes. On to another bad MCU film, Iron Man 2. This is better than Hulk, but the problem with this film, again, it just tries to cram in so much stuff, you know, with all this SHIELD stuff and all this government, and it just becomes really boring and a bit sad, to be honest, because I was really excited for this film when it came out. So this film, unfortunately, is a massive step down from the first Iron Man. I would still watch it. I think it does have its good moments. The final battle looks cool, but it's just literally nailed off a rehash of the first Iron Man's. But I would definitely put it in the C tier. I would watch it over Fantastic Four: Rise of Silver Surfer, definitely. I just think it has a lot of problems, but, you know, Robert Downey Jr. is still there. He's still the best part of this film. Thor, next. I've got to be honest, I don't like this film either. This film is very uninteresting. I get this. The first act was fine. It's just as soon as they get to Earth, this film just digs a hole for itself and it becomes so boring sometimes. Earth is the least interesting part of this film. And Asgard, some of the crap there was just really boring. Overall, this film is just very uneventful. The first act is where this film really gets its merits, but after that, there's that one good scene in the second act, and that was it. I would still watch this film though. I think it is better than Incredible Hulk. I put it above Punisher Warzone. It's not as good as X-Men Last Stand, which is not a good movie in itself, but I would definitely watch that over it. Captain America: The First Avenger. This film's okay. It gets a bit too much praise than it should. I will say this, the ending was the best scene in the film. And again, the first act is very good. The first act is near enough flawless to me. It's just, during the second act, there just was a lot of filler. And there was just a load of mindless action scenes for no reason. And that's, again, where this film gets bogged down with its action. There's just way too much of it in a film that should be focusing on the main character, not on the flashy action. I would still watch the film. I'd definitely watch it over X-Men and Amazing Spider-Man. I wouldn't say it's as entertaining and good as the Blade films, but I still think it's a decent entry into the MCU. But the big one, the one that everyone talked about when this film came out, the Avengers. I love the Avengers. I think most Marvel fans do. This film changed superhero films forever. Who would have thought that you could have all these team-ups? It's just brilliant. Yeah, it looks like a TV movie. Yeah, some of the effects look crap. But I don't care. This film's just pure entertainment. Every character gets to do something, and it's just a fun ride for anyone. This film is going into the A tier, mostly because, as I said, it just looks a bit cheap and the effects are a bit garbage. But I would watch it over the original Spider-Man. I think it's the best one in the A tier. I still really love this film. Now for a hot take. A very big hot take. Iron Man 3. Now, I know why people hate this film. I really get it. But the thing is, I like it when movies change comic books for the best. Now, I know people didn't like what happened with the twist. I'm not going to spoil it if you somehow haven't seen this film. But I think this is the best Iron Man film. And I'm not even joking. There's just so much to love about this film. I love how they brought Tony down to earth with him not having as much Iron Man. Would have liked to see a bit more of Iron Man, but I did like what they did with him. The only problem is the villain, the main one, wasn't developed as much. He did have a good backstory, but not much emotional connection really with Tony. And this film is bogged down by that, but it's still going in S tier. And I'm going to say it's better than the first Iron Man. Not as good as Deadpool, but I still think this is one of the best MCU movies by far. Now on to what I think is the worst MCU movie, Thor: The Dark World. I hate this film. This film is boring, bland. The villain is the worst villain we've had in the MCU. The only good things, Tom Hiddleston and Chris Hemsworth have some good chemistry and they play their characters well, and the effects look good. That's all this film has. One of the main characters dies who I've had no emotional connection to, so why do I care? And I just really hate this film. It's just so boring. But I would definitely watch it over Ang Lee's Hulk. It's not as good as the second Ghost Rider for me. I just really hate this film. I really do. But back onto a positive note. Captain America: The Winter Soldier. In my opinion, the best out of the Captain America franchise. I love it. Just the story. This is pretty much a spy thriller. And seeing Steve, coat to this new world which he's never been to. It's just fantastic. I love what they did with his character. Again, some of the effects look really cheap, which is a problem all these MCU films have. But this film's still really gripping, really tense. And the action, for me, is the best part. You use a lot of shaky cam, but they do it well. I can tell what's happening, and it's shot beautifully. It's going to go in the A tier. I will say it's better than Avengers for me. I just love this film so much. Now on to everyone's film, which I think most people say is their favourite MCU film, Guardians of the Galaxy. Yeah, it's going straight in the S tier. Straight in the S tier. Not as good as Iron Man 3, I think, but definitely better than Iron Man 1. I love this film. The soundtrack to this film, brilliant. The way it kicks off. The villain's underdeveloped, yeah, which is a big problem that this movie had. But I still think this film is funny, charming, and just overall a great cast to top it off. This film is fantastic. Anyone can have a great time with this movie. Age of Ultron, Avengers Age of Ultron. It's fine. It was a big step down from the original Avengers. The problem was the trailers misled me with Ultron. I was expecting Ultron to be this dark, cold, robotic killer. But he was just a guy who cracked jokes every minute, and he just got annoying after a while. But the introduction of Scarlet Witch, who's become one of my favourite MCU characters now. Quicksilver was garbage. He was really not a good character. But I still do tend to like this film a little bit. I think it does have its good moments. The party scene, for me, was the best part of this film. I would definitely watch it over Captain America: First Avenger. And I would still watch it over the Blade films, in my opinion. But just not as good as Spider-Man 3 to me. I still don't mind this film. It's just, I think the problems just nearly outweigh the positives for me, unfortunately. And then to Ant-Man. This film for me, while not bad, just quite forgettable. I think it wasn't all that funny to me, which is really what this film is trying to do. But I do think it has some strong performances. I do like the shrinking action. I really like the final fight where they enlarge that Thomas the Tank Engineer figure. I think this film is still entertaining, but boring, and that's where it kind of slaps itself in the face a little bit. But I still really do like this film, sort of. I would put it in the B tier, just above The Amazing Spider-Man. It just, yeah, it was just a bit forgettable and needed to do a bit more for me to fully invest into it. Captain America Civil War, what some people think is the best MCU film. I, for me, do have problems with it. I have read the Civil War comic, and judging by the stakes of the comic to this, the comic has bigger stakes. One main character dies, which was one of the best deaths in Marvel history in the comics, but this film's stakes are lowered. More of a political, whilst I am not more personal side of it. But the introduction of Tom Holland's Spider-Man, he was born to play Spider-Man. We'll get into his film soon, but I still like Civil War. I really do like Civil War, and I will put it in the A tier. I would definitely watch it over Deadpool 2 and X-Men 2, just below Big Hero 6. Doctor Strange. First off, Benedict Cumberbatch is Doctor Strange. I love Benedict Cumberbatch as Doctor Strange. But this film has a lot of problems. The villain is one of the worst villains ever. And it's a shame he's played by Mads Mikkelsen, who I thought might have made a good Doctor Doom in the future, but obviously that's not happening now. Christine Palmer, very bad love interest, very underdeveloped. Felt like more friends than lovers. And that's where this film bogs down for me. But I do like Doctor Strange. It's not boring. It is weird, but it's easy to understand. It is going in the B tier for me. I would definitely watch it over the Blade films. Just below Age of Ultron, I think that's a fair spot. Guardians of the Galaxy Part 2, Volume 2, sorry. I say it's not as good as the first one. It's less funny than the first one. It's still very wacky. And I think the villain, one of the greatest MCU villains with ego, brilliant. And I love Rocket Raccoon in this. I think he was a great character with a good arc. I still do like Guardians 2. It's just not hitting those heights that the first one had. It does lose a lot of its charm and a lot of its humour, but I still really love the film. But I would say, I'd say it's better than the Wolverine. Not as good as the Spider-Man. I'd definitely put it over Wolverine though. It's got Spider-Man Homecoming. For me, personal choice, hot take. Going in the S tier for me, just above the original Iron Man. I love Spider-Man Homecoming. They got him so right. I love how they just brush past his backstory, because we've known this backstory for years now. It's in our heads. Why do we need to explain it again? I think it's excellent. And the way it sets up his character in future films is just excellent. Tom Holland is Spider-Man. You know, Michael Keaton as Vulture, brilliant, apart from when he was in that one movie. But we're not going to talk about that. But this film I love. You need to go and watch this film. If you're not a big fan of this film, which I know some people are, I'd really go back and watch it, because I think you'll have a second opinion on it. I really still do love it. I'd head to a personal favourite, Thor Ragnarok. I love Thor Ragnarok. This is the funniest MCU film by far. They changed Thor for the better. He's so much better in this film. I love him. You know, everyone's just brilliant. The only problem is the villain, but this still is my third favourite MCU film. And it is going in the S tier, no surprise. It's not as good as Spider-Man 2, I think. I think Spider-Man 2 had a more compelling villain than Hela. Not that Hela had a good backstory or anything, she did, but I just felt quite underdeveloped and not really much of a threat, unfortunately. But I think Thor Ragnarok was a winner for me. And then Black Panther. Now, I'm going to get a lot of stick for this, but I don't care. I know this people say, oh, this is the best MCU film. Now, it's historical, I get it. It's a very significant film. I respect that. I think Chadwick Boseman is brilliant, rest in peace. This film is very entertaining, but it gets more praise than it should. You know, there's a romance that just did not need to be there. Some of the CGI, especially in the last act, was just terrible, and this is where this film gets bogged down a lot. But Killmonger is a fantastic villain, a great villain. It's just it had a couple of plot points that just did not need to be there. and some garbage effects and a final battle that was just way too overdramatic. This is not the best MCU film, guys. It is still a good film, though, and I would put it in the B tier, just above Captain America the First Avenger for me. And then Avengers Infinity War, the one that changed it all. Yeah, it's going in the S tier. You know it is. It's going above Spider-Man 2. I love Avengers Infinity War. I will admit I did cry when I went to see this film in cinemas. I think most people did. And I was just shocked. I just couldn't wait to see Endgame and the other two films. There's just so much to love about Avengers Infinity War. The only problem I have, there's just a few too many jokes in what needs to be a dark film. And that's pretty much the only problem I have with the film. Ant-Man and Wasp, yeah. I literally don't remember anything about this film. I don't like this film at all. It's not the worst MCU film. It doesn't deserve to go in D tier for me. I would definitely watch it over Thor. Not as good as X-Men Last Stand, though. Or is it? Ooh. Yeah, I'll put it over Last Stand. I'll put it over X-Men Last Stand. But it's not as funny as the first one. Not that the first one was overly funny, but it was very light, very tame. And I get that we needed a bit of a break after what we saw in Infinity War, but it was just forgettable and didn't do anything new, really. And it was just quite, yeah, just quite a disappointment. Captain Marvel. A political free review of this one. Brie Larson is good. The de-aging effects on Samuel L. Jackson are great. I didn't notice it. The problem I have, the villain is very boring. The first act is a slog to get through. It was just very cliched and quite predictable, and I didn't like this film as much as I would have. The trailers looked fine, and it kind of intrigued me to go to the film, but this film didn't do much for me, unfortunately. I will put it in the C tier. I would say it's better than Iron Man 2, and yeah, I'll put it just below Thor. It didn't really do that much for me, and it was quite disappointing. The big one, Avengers End Game. Get yourself up there. In some ways, Infinity War is better, and I get that Endgame has a lot of problems. But I just can't bring myself to put it any lower than it is, because this film was anything that I wanted. All it had to do was just bring everyone back, and I love how they did it. It's, Robert Downey Jr., everyone in this film does a brilliant performance. It doesn't feel like 3 hours, it feels like 2, in some ways 2.5. I wouldn't say it's very rewatchable, but I don't care. I can't bring myself to put it below Infinity War or any of the others. It is just that good to me and so significant. It made me cry. Next up, Spider-Man Far From Home. Not as good as Homecoming, in my opinion. I still do think it's a good film. The only problem is mostly nitpicks, but there are a lot of nitpicks for a film. I don't see why Tony Stark would trust a teenager with billion-dollar glasses that can make you shoot rockets and stuff and start tech. It just felt very unrealistic. But Tom Holland again is great. Quentin Beck, Mysterio, brilliantly played by Jake Gyllenhaal. And that post-credit scene, wow, what a film it set up. I love Spider-Man Far From Home. Wouldn't say it's as good as the original Spider-Man. I would say, though, it's better than Guardians of the Galaxy 2. Black Widow, a very disappointing film. First off, the release date of this film was really bad. Thank you, COVID. There's loads of scenes where they act like, oh, will Black Widow die? When I know that she won't because of Endgame. But I will say Florence Pugh as Yelena Belova, excellent. And that's really all I have to say. The action's fine. The villain's absolutely boring and really laughable. This film was a big disappointment for me, and I'm gonna have to put it in the C tier, just above Fantastic Four, Rise of Silver Surfer, just below Iron Man 2. This film really disappointed me, unfortunately. On to a film that I loved, Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. I could not believe how good this film was. I went to this screening when I went to see it, Didn't expect much from it, but wow, this is 8 out of 10, 8.5 out of 10. The action is the best part of this film. Just the way it flows is just excellent. The characters are compelling. The villain is one of the best we've had in the MCU. I just love it. The only problem I have, the second act was a bit of a slog to get through, and it did mess with the pacing a bit. But that's all I negatively have to say about this film. I loved Shang-Chi. I'm going to say it's better than Iron Man 1. It's in the S tier. I loved it. Now, one that's going to be controversial to some. Eternals. Now, people are saying this is the first bad MCU film, which, if you couldn't tell by my ratings, it's clearly not. But this film gets a lot of hate than it should, in my opinion. The acting's great. The effects are the best I've seen in the MCU. The fight scenes are very well entertaining. I like the fight scenes. It is the story. I did not get the story up until about 3/4 of the way through, which is already a red flag. The characters have no chemistry between them. The romance is dead. The story-wise, this film is garbage. I did think the way they handled exposition was quite well, but this film is still bad, but gets a lot of hate than it should, I think. I am going to put it in the C tier. I wouldn't watch it over Venom, Let There Be Carnage, and Daredevil. I'm going to put it over Ant-Man and Wasp, though. I don't know why this film gets a lot of hate. Spider-Man, No Way Home. Yeah. Oh. Yeah. You know where it's going. It's straight in the S tier. Not the best Spider-Man film. I still think Spider-Verse is better, and Spider-Man 2. But, come on. Spider-Man No Way Home. In what world will you ever see 3 Spider-Men swinging from the Statue of Liberty? That shot was the best shot in the whole film. I could not believe what I was watching when I went to see this film. The atmosphere in the cinema was brilliant. Tom Holland does his best as Spider-Man in this film. There's just so much to love. It's better than Homecoming. It's better than Daredevil. Daredevil? It's better than Deadpool. It's definitely better than X-Men Days of Future Past. Not as good as Thor Ragnarok to me. I just love Spider-Man No Way Home. And then finally, the most recent one, Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Now, I know people don't like this film as much, and I get it. I think this film is really good. I reviewed it on YouTube, as you know. I gave it an 8.5 out of 10. I've addressed the problems in that. In fact, I'll leave the review to that in the description too. But there's just so much to love about this film. The way it tells a compelling story. Yeah, it does mess with the MCU a bit, but I don't mind. This film is still excellent to me. It's going in the A tier. It's going just below the Avengers. I will say it's better than the original Spider-Man. And that is it. That is the entire tier list. It's took me 2 videos. It's took me hours of editing. It's been a long ride, but I've got it done, and I'm quite happy. Just going to do a bit of a scroll up and down just to make you check. There we go. Hopefully that's all good. And that's it for these tier list videos. I hope they entertained you. Remember, I'm going to be starting my Jurassic Park and Jurassic World reviews in a couple of days. Make sure to look out for my Jurassic Park review. I hope you all enjoyed this video. Remember, watch part 1 if you haven't watched that one yet. But I hope you all enjoyed this video. I hope it all really entertained you. And you all have a good day. See you later.